This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to a new Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Thursday night, December 12th, 2024, as we bring you a new episode. The entire Sox Machine crew is back home from the 2024 winter meetings down in Dallas, Texas. We hope that you enjoyed our coverage of the annual event. And again, huge thank you to our Sox Machine supporters for making this trip possible. On the very last day, as I get to Jim Margulis, who has a table ready for us to work the Rule 5 draft, we get a text message from our beat reporter, James Fegan, that Garrett Crochet was traded. The moment we had waited for arrived 30 minutes before I had to head to the airport. The Boston Red Sox offered enough to convince White Sox GM Chris Getz to ship the prize left-handed starter to Beantown in exchange for 4 prospects, with the headliners being the 2023 first-round draft pick catcher Kyle Teel and the 2024 first-round pick right fielder Braden Montgomery. Was this a good deal for the White Sox? And what's next for Chris Getz after the winter meetings? Joining me to recap the trade is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com, Jim Margulis, and the Sox Machine beat reporter, James Fegan. And gentlemen, it feels like I haven't talked to you in days. I'm kidding. Welcome to the show. It's our 4th podcast this week. But the Crochet trade finally happened. And James, as you wrote on SoxMachine.com, this was a sort of trade the front office had to make. What additional insight have you learned about this trade since the winter meetings?
One, I guess, like why this package might have popped to them or met the standard is that in Teel and in Braden Montgomery, you got 2 players that they basically wanted and valued. And in the case of Teel, pursued really since not getting in the draft. Teel was somebody that they were asking for as part of Dylan Cease packages last year. And Braden Montgomery is someone, Getz said on record that he was someone that, maybe was top 3 for them on their board before the injury. Definitely talking to people amateur scouting, they liked them a lot. So they viewed this as kind of like an opportunity to snatch someone they had on value of where it was comparable to what they were getting with Hagen Smith at number 5. So more background in terms of why these 2 really hit the spot as far as the value. You also heard that, and I had heard it a little bit before, my old colleague Matt Gelb at The Athletic reported that, the Phillies had gotten to the point with Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford fronted package. There wasn't as much detail about who like the other 2 pieces of that package were, but, at least some Phillies people seem to be of the mind like, we offered you something just as good not that long ago that fell through. Obviously, maybe there were some mitigating factors for why things were weird at the deadline with Crochet and where they were sure his value was. And maybe there's a little bit more clarity now with 2 years left and, not necessarily the extension ask hanging over anything at any point. It seems like they were kind of also waiting for the spike to come from a team that was a little bit, spurned in free agency, so to speak. And the Red Sox were in on Max Fried. There are people who thought that was going to happen, were disappointed they didn't offer more than that. So it was kind of natural if they were balking at what the price was for that caliber starter that they would shift to the trade market. And Chris Getz kind of said with a wink, like, correlation doesn't issue causation. But a little bit after the Fried went to the Yankees, all of a sudden things picked up, and within 24 hours you have a deal. So It seems like they were kind of waiting. The whole point of kind of taking this offseason and waiting through is when there was going to be this moment that kind of created this jolt that got things forward, and then to get kind of 2 draft targets. It's like, what else are we waiting around for, really? And, the industry kind of thinks Wickelman Gonzalez is a reliever, but at least, and it gets certainly allowed that as a possibility, but at least kind of the bid on this is that this is someone they are unique in the industry and thinking can start. So obviously another kind of thread to where they could have some value add is if, the Bannister-led pitcher development system is really as much better as they feel that it is or talk like it is from years ago. So it's kind of something that they positioned around as this is a group that they feel like is arrow up for them. So off they went.
And then, Jim, you wrote about your reaction to the deal on SoxMachine.com earlier this morning on Thursday. Do you feel better about this trade return than what Chris Getz was able to get for Dylan Cease last spring training?
Certainly, just because, it's one more player, 4 versus 3, case closed. Beyond that, you have Gonzalez, the only one on the 40-man roster just added, so he has all his options remaining going into spring training. Nobody else is yet on the 40-man roster, so there aren't any time pressures in case Montgomery is more of a, medium-term development project coming back from the ankle injury. There's no immediate pressure for Teel to, hit the ground running and, start accruing service time. Meidroth seems like maybe the most major league ready in terms of AAA playing time and a very open spot on the 26-man roster for somebody like him. So, I can imagine him being part of a mix for the opening day roster, but again, not on the 40-man roster yet. So he doesn't have to be if something goes awry. Whereas in previous trades, like the Cease trade, you had Jairo Iriarte already on the 40-man roster. You had, Drew Thorpe as somebody who is, kind of Cease-like in terms of right-handed starter, mustache, and you're hoping that he's able to throw, 5-6 innings as well as Cease did. So basically, you're trading for a direct replacement, and Cease is hard to replace, as we just saw with Thorpe having the elbow injury and Cease through 30 starts, 32, 33 starts every year. So that's, an immediate case of just how hard it is to directly replace, Cease with another pitcher. So I think, for a few reasons, whether it's because there are more avenues for each of these guys to have value, because you're not looking for another Garrett Crochet by trading Garrett Crochet. It's a little easier to, it takes pressure off or defrays pressure, allows various parts of the package to take a step forward and maybe carry the deal versus having a Miguel Vargas type where Miguel Vargas better figure out a position right away and start hitting because all of a sudden he's out of options and needs the hits. That's where they've gone awry before, or really complicated things, maybe took another team's headache away from them, or a potential future headache from them by saying Miguel Vargas out of options, they might have wanted to trade him anyway. So to get Tommy Edman for him effectively through the three-way deal and Kopech is great for them. Those were cases where I thought Getz looked, his inexperience showed, or maybe other GMs are taking advantage of it. This one feels fair. I think because Crochet did not have a full season's workload under his belt as a starter, I think that's maybe what kept it from being the killer package where you get Roman Anthony or you demand him and nothing less. He has questions as well, so I think it's good. I think it meets the pass fail test. If you're giving a grade, I would say B. Kind of feels like he could do better. It could be more exciting, but also I understand why he did it, and I understand why it's commensurate. If Montgomery looks no worse for the wear after the ankle injury, all of a sudden, that's probably pretty cool.
One thing that's on my mind, James, is we were hearing the rumor, and it may still be true, that Dylan Cease could be available in a trade. And even after the winter meeting, Seattle is putting it out there that Luis Castillo could be available in trade. with these type of marquee pitchers, seemingly, again, if the gossip holds true, available in trade, did that impact the timing for Chris Getz to pull the trigger to get out ahead before other teams suddenly had other options than Garrett Crochet?
It certainly impressed the idea that it's not just a straight game of waiting to the last moment, or the longer they wait, the shallower the pool gets, the better. It's more of have a set price or have a set targets that make it happen, and once they're available, pull the trigger. So I think it kind of is a reminder of that, of why not necessarily long negotiations are necessary to be successful ones. Yeah, I think it could have had an impact. It does seem like that. These are things that are kind of cropping up. I guess there could be a stagger between the reports that we're seeing and how long Luis Castillo has actually been on the market. But one thing I think the Sox had, or at least gets referenced, is that they've been basically talking to teams about what the package is going to be for 8 months. Their valuations change a little bit.
Right. Good point.
Guys ended the season differently. Kyle Teel got up to AAA, and then it kind of may at AAA. How that specifically affected his value, who knows? But they're a lot farther in their conversations in terms of knowing each other, knowing what's going to be basically the two leaders that would be a package they would accept for a bit, than maybe teams that are just kind of first really towing the line of how much. I think there are two scenarios where San Diego's fine trading or not trading Dylan Cease. He's not someone that has to go up their hands for them to build a competitive team that they want. So I think they're not necessarily forcing their hand a little bit where people can move on to the next trade very quickly, but it is a reminder that they're not the only person at the party, so they can't just act that way.
Yeah, I do want to see if Cease is traded. I kind of want to see it happen just to see what San Diego could get for him, partially to compare it to what the White Sox got for him, but also in the context of last year's market, Cease, that was kind of a lackluster return or anticlimactic return for how long it took to trade him. But then you saw Blake Snell last forever and Jordan Montgomery last forever, and just really seemed like nobody was willing to pay the price for upper echelon starters who get Cy Young support. And perhaps it's a case where the free agent market and the trade market were intertwined, and that just the asking price was not met in any regard. And now you have this winter where Snell gets a killer deal, Kikuchi gets a above average deal. Basically every starter signing is killing their crowdsource estimates on Fangraphs or MLB trade rumors. So perhaps all of a sudden the trade value kicks up as well. So maybe one reason to hedge on any kind of Cease criticism is maybe it was the wrong winter to deal him, but then you saw the Fetty deal, and that was just kind of, I think, an embarrassment a little bit, to where you can't you can't absolve Getz too much, but it's something I'm keeping in mind.
Yeah, I'd also want a Cease deal for a comparable, because my kind of theory of why they, so to speak, had to trade Crochet if they weren't going to extend him is that he could have the 195 inning season this coming year where he's really just as good or even better, and would his trade value even be as high as 1 year as a very bona fide Cy Young caliber guy, versus 2 years when the first year is as cheap as he's going to be next year, which just seems like the big thing that put him as this gleaming alternative free agency in so many front offices' minds. So if Cease could provide some sort of statistical comparable of how much the value depreciates from just having that lost cheaper year of control, I'd appreciate it for our references. Yeah.
Well, get on it, AJ Preller. Trade Dylan Cease so we know. Let's break it down as far as the players in return for the Chicago White Sox in this deal. We're going to start with Kyle Teel. As James already alluded to, Teel did reach AAA last year. Only played 28 games in AAA, but what was impressive about Kyle Teel that really shocked me, because watching him at Virginia, I didn't get a great sense that this is going to be someone that has above average home run power in the major leagues. I think that he could be a 10 home run type of catcher, maybe up to 15, but more doubles than home runs. Well, in AA last year, Kyle Teel had an 852 OPS. He batted almost 300, 299, got on base at a 390 clip and slugged 462. That's a terrific slash line. If any of the White Sox prospects had a slash line like that, we'd be raving about them going into this offseason. Then Teel went to AAA, 28 games, batted 255. Still had a good on base percentage, 374, but his slugging dropped to 343. That is where offensively I wonder on how Teel is going to be for the White Sox and what kind of production they can get from him at the plate. Behind the plate, I think he is a very good defensive catcher. He's got the athleticism to stick behind home plate. He's been mentioned he can play in the outfield. Let's nix that idea right now. I would like to, but I'm sure it won't. Good for him that he can be athletic. Let's not play him out of position, White Sox. Let's not play that game. The one thing for the old school catching purists, Teel is a one-knee guy behind home plate. So he has one knee. He drops one knee down. I know that drives some people crazy, but it helps him, especially framing pitches in the lower part of the strike zone. Now you got Teel, and naturally the first question was, what about Edgar Caro, Jim? So how does this White Sox catcher situation look right now? You got Corey Lee, you got Chucky Robinson, you got Edgar Caro, you got Kyle Teel. Do they run with some type of combination to start opening day out of those four? Or do the White Sox still need another catcher to at least help them start the 2025 season?
It seems like they should sign a catcher, like whether it's, like somebody like Tucker Barnhart or something like that. Like, here's somebody who's probably Chucky Robinson, but is not Chucky Robinson, but just, is somebody different enough to throw in there for a month with Corey Lee probably as part-time catcher, unless, Walker McKinnon shows up and says, like, Corey Lee, no. Like, just, white flag on Corey Lee. Let's get him out of here. I can't solve him. And, then perhaps, if Teel, it looks really good in spring training, or Caro looks really good. It still seems like Caro's a little bit further behind just because of age, experience, and the back injury at the end of the year kind of robbing their upper level look at him. Like, it still seems like he might be on the slower track compared to Teel. But, if they talk about him in spring training, like, I like throwing to this guy. Perhaps it's a case where Teel does break camp with the White Sox. But I still imagine, like, I would be surprised if it's Robinson, Lee. Like, we'll see what happens with NRIs or what have you, that somebody comes into camp with a good position to take a 40-man roster spot and a 26-man roster spot just to give the White Sox some padding. Long term, I think it's a case of, see which one emerges. Like, I don't like the idea of rotating Teel in and out of left field. Like, I think it's, unless he was like a superlative hitter where you want his bat in the lineup every day and Caro is just as good, like, I could see a case where maybe you make it happen. But if you have two catchers who should be number ones, or you think should be number ones, and you like Teel as a 1A and Caro as a 1B, perhaps you trade Caro. Like Dodgers had that situation where they trade Keibert Ruiz and don't really have any regrets in doing so, but he was in a similar position, highly regarded catcher in the minors, but they had Smith, they have Dalton Rushing, they have other guys they like, so Ruiz draws the short straw and gets traded. So maybe it's a case with Caro too, to where part of his game is lagging, or his bat doesn't quite translate from AA to the majors. Maybe he gets dealt that way, but it would be nice for somebody or one of them to establish some major league value before feeling like they have to be traded. I think with the way the Charlotte roster is, you could probably catch every other day with those guys, have them DH the other day, have plenty of time to look at their catching, look at their bats, and truly decide a winner. Maybe competition makes them better. Iron sharpens iron, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't get too hung up on trading one or the other right now. I also wouldn't get too hung up on having two catchers at AAA who both need the everyday playing time, because ideally every team has a depth. It's not a problem. It's a blessing.
James, do you think the White Sox need to add another catcher to at least start 2025?
Yeah. I at least think we could be talking as like little as like like Tucker Barnhart would probably be like a priority NRI, something like that. But Chucky Robinson wasn't getting name checked a lot when he was talking about the catching mix, so I wouldn't feel like guaranteed about his 40-man status going into next spring. But he mentioned Corey a lot, and I think like he should at least be competing, especially looking with him working with Walker McKinnon for some sort of role, whether that's starter or backup who plays pretty often. I think that's fair for them to put him as part of their major league mix, probably holding down some sort of spot, especially with those two guys you would assume probably go to AAA, because neither of them have really. You also have either Teel hasn't really conquered the level, or Edgar Caro, who just didn't get a ton of playing time there and is very young. Though I have to say, if I'm working to start a feud between them right away, Caro put up 275, 360, 463 at Double A himself. You're younger than Kyle Teel, so there's some prospects in the White Sox system putting up those stat lines. But yeah, I think optimally, with no one really established themselves as like someone you can really rely on to give you a like baseline starting or even like above replacement starting, a guaranteed deal for a catcher would be good, but I wouldn't be surprised if them simply sign a veteran NRI who, you can very easily see making the team and being like lauded for working with pitchers, but maybe not putting up really competitive at bats in a way that bolsters the production from last year that much. But I think they'll add bodies of some kind to their mix, and probably someone who has a good chance of making a roster spot.
Yeah, so in mid-December, I think we are in agreement here, and this is going to throw some White Sox fans off, and we're going to hear it in February. If they do sign like a Tucker Barnhart or a veteran catcher to a minor league deal and have them compete for a job for the opening day roster, Caro and Teel both need more time in AAA. And if you have both of them in AAA in Charlotte, going every other day catching, the other DHing, so they still get their at-bats, that means your other two catchers are Corey Lee and Chucky Robinson. I can already hear the groans from our podcast listeners. They don't want that. So if you don't want that, then the White Sox do need to bring in another catcher. I think at the end of 2025, we're going to see a lot of Caro and Teel. I just think at the beginning of 2025, I think it's going to be Corey Lee and someone who's currently not part of the organization being the second catcher. Jim, we could have as many as 5 catchers start games for the White Sox in 2025.
Like 5 blades, 5 catchers, 5 catcher roster.
5 catcher roster. Make everyone catchers.
If you're like me, you're looking for an edge for sports betting. So when I heard Masterclass had a new class on beating the odds, taught by the pros who have made millions, I had to check it out. With Masterclass, you can learn from the best to become your best. Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you can learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership with Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every instructor. And you can access Masterclass on your phone, computer, smart TV, or even in audio mode. Novice bettors are at a huge disadvantage, with most losing early and fast. Before, the knowledge needed to level up was hard to come by. Now there's Masterclass, and the classes really make a difference. 88% of members feel that Masterclass has made a positive impact on their lives. I use it, and you should too. Plus, every new membership comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So don't wait another moment to start your learning journey with Masterclass. And Masterclass always has great offers during the holidays, sometimes up to as much as 50% off. Head over to masterclass.com/Blue Wire for their current offer. That's up to 50% off at masterclass.com/Blue Wire. That's masterclass.com/Blue Wire. And remember, all sports betting involves risk, and you're responsible for complying with all sports betting laws in your jurisdiction.
We have one more act for you this evening. I don't even need to say his name. Mr. Bob Dylan.
From the director of Walk the Line and Ford vs. Ferrari.
For anyone who's going to hold your attention on a stage, you have to kind of be a freak.
And starring Timothy Chalamet as Bob Dylan.
Are you a freak?
Hope so.
Once upon a time, you're just so fine.
Inspired by the true story.
I want to know which side he's on.
This Christmas.
They just want me singing Blowing in the Wind for the rest of my life.
Bobby, what do you want to be?
Whatever it is they don't want me to be.
He defied everyone.
Turn it down!
Play loud.
to change everything.
He's our Elvis.
With no direction home.
Timothy Chalamet, Edward Norton, Elle Fanning, Monica Barbaro.
Make some noise, BD. Track some mud on the carpet.
A complete unknown. Only in theaters Christmas Day. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
All right, so that's Kyle Teel. Braden Montgomery. James, is Montgomery the make or break prospect in this trade return of us looking 2-3 years down the road and saying this was a win for the White Sox?
The most likely target. He's someone I see like the most kind of weird split between, like, you know, it could be an all-star caliber, like corner outfielder with a 30 home run power, and given how like athletic he is and how fast and how good defensively he could be, to like one scout saying like he's going to be Lucas Urseg. He's going to be a relief pitcher in 5 years, like, because they're saying the bat's not going to work and he's got the huge throwing arms. Like, I think a more polite way would probably just say there's more bust potential, but obviously if you're running a 20K rate in college, that's, you know, a concerning issue that's going to have to be worked out. He's so athletic in his swing from the left side that you'd think that the bat speed is there, that he's should be able to make contact with fastballs consistently, because his plate discipline is really good. It seems like it's mostly in zone swing and miss. That's spiking that up. I think he's the most likely guy who has the biggest swing, and certainly probably, if things click right, has the raw tools to have the biggest ceiling. That said, there's variance in every prospect. Like Kyle Teel, there's no like true above average tool. There's a lot of like average to plus, and it's all across the board, combined with like a lot of know-how and, you know, a very good approach, and really knows how to catch, really manages pitches well. But, you know, average tools profiles with somebody who really knows what they're doing, those have popped for guys who become kind of, especially the catcher position. You've seen kind of perennial 10-year guys who get a couple of, you know, all-star appearances because they're, you know, respected defensively. And anytime they have like a hot year with a bat, they get value. He could be someone who's in that territory where he gets referred to, especially in terms of like his value as a team in the clubhouse, is regarding him as a star at some point, just because the tools are average-ish, and that's not like maybe the reasonable expectation. That's not like there's no potential in there for him to be the guy who we remember this trade for, and to be exceptionally like just hedging on everything. Wickelman, Gonzalez, like, it is very plus stuff. So if they somehow do add 2 grades of command, which is the issue that like every evaluator has, and certainly what Boston had with him, then that's all of a sudden a pretty good starter. And who really knows how good that can go, because we haven't really seen him throw strikes in any way that really, you know, demonstrate how good his stuff can play consistently. So yeah, it's probably just a reliever, and it's the 4th piece in the trade, so it's not what it's hinging on. It's not the make or break piece, but like there's an avenue where that dude's the second best guy on the trade. There's probably a bad avenue where he's the best guy in the trade, but like that's a fringe scenario. We don't need to engage that right now. But well, I mean, there's other ways that they can win, but just Braden Montgomery.
I mean, with Montgomery, if he becomes a 4-WAR consistent right fielder, and Kyle Teel's like a consistent 2.5-WAR, 3-WAR catcher, and Montgomery is the best prospect in that deal, I think that's still a win-win, James, isn't it?
Yes, I'm just saying, like, there's other ways. I don't think if Braden Montgomery busts, that there's no way that this trade can be like survivable.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
Probably the easiest way for it to not be, but there's variance.
Yeah.
The future is unknowable is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. With Montgomery, I think he's got a higher ceiling than Teel, Jim. And for the White Sox, so desperate, wanting to address right field, I am curious on how they use Montgomery for the upcoming season, because that was a pretty gruesome ankle injury. And though he showed up on MLB Network and he joined one of the morning shows to talk about the trade, I like to see how he moves afterwards of this type of significant injury to the lower half, and that impacts his mobility, not just running the bases, but also in right field, to properly gauge just how far away that he is from the majors. I'm kind of assuming if he is healthy and ready to go, the White Sox may start him in Winston-Salem in High A, because he just did not play at all after he got drafted last year. that would still be like an aggressive assignment for the White Sox, because lately when they have been drafting guys like Jacob Gonzalez, I think he spent a little time in Kannapolis, but a lot more time in Winston-Salem. But if Montgomery can hit the ground running, and he proves that his ankle is fine, and he proves that he's still hitting for power, especially from the left-hand side, against high A pitching, I don't think it's crazy to say that if Braden Montgomery's healthy and he's hitting the ball well, that he's going to spend a lot of time in Birmingham in Double-A, and then he might be part of the White Sox mix as soon as 2026. So I think highly of Braden Montgomery. But Jim, how do you feel about Montgomery? Is he the make or break prospect return for this trade?
I think he's the player though who makes it a 1 for 2. In terms of trading Crochet for Teel, it's 1 for 1. That's great, especially since it's a position of need, premium position, can really help in a lot of ways. But in terms of the way the White Sox operates and how much they don't spend on premium talent, it would really help if he turned into a premium talent. Even if he's not a perennial all-star, just somebody who's above average in right field, the way they've never had an above average right fielder since they traded Adam Eaton. That would be really helpful because it's one less thing they have to spend on, one less skill set they have to acquire, left-handed power. And so that's, I think, where it has an impact with this particular team. If there were ever a case where the White Sox start spending more, or they find ways to develop left-hand power to where his skills are less scarce, then maybe there's some pressure off him. But right now, with the way we know the White Sox are, it would certainly help so much if he were what they thought he was before the injury.
Well, we talked quite a bit about Wickelman Gonzalez. Starter right now for the White Sox. Some scouts think that he's going to be a reliever.
He's thrown 111 innings. That's, I think, what's helpful is that he's proven, even with huge control issues, that he's able to throw a starter's amount of pitches in the game. And so that half of the equation is taken care of.
Yeah, he allowed 76 hits last year across 3 levels, walked 70. So he's hard to make contact against, but easy to get on base. He did strike out 168, so he's got big stuff. At the very least, he's going to be a reliever for the White Sox. I think he's a great project for Brian Bannister and the White Sox pitching development to see if he can be more, if he can cut down on the walk rate. But the last player we'll talk about as far as this trade is Chase Meidroth. And on his weekly chat on Fangraphs.com, our best friend, Dan Zaborski, said that Zips is projecting Chase Meidroth right now in mid-December to be the second best position player for the White Sox after Luis Robert. Now, from a trade perspective, great job, Chris Getz. You got a position player that would be the second best one that you got on the team. But Chase Meidroth did not play a lot in majors, and boy, that does not say a whole lot about Andrew Benintendi and Andrew Vaughn's upcoming Zips projections for the 2025 season. But James Meidroth, he does a good job getting on base. There's no power. He doesn't have a great throwing arm, so third base is a little iffy. He should probably stay more up the middle, probably more of a second baseman in the major leagues. But is this another super utility option for Chris Getz, a new manager, Will Venable, to consider in spring training, even though Jacob Amaya and Lenyn Sosa are out of options?
Yes, that's explicitly what he said. He wants him to come to camp to fight for a spot, and I think that's kind of a natural expectation that he would have a chance to beat those guys out, even with their value. I certainly think Amaya, if he doesn't make the team, they're going to risk that. I think they're at a pretty similar place with Lenyn Sosa, but maybe would probably at least seek around to see if what he did end the season and destroying the Venezuelan league leads to him being a small Cash trade or something like that in the middle of spring training.
First baseman
if they want to see the light. Yeah, but Dan Zaborski does this fine work. I don't know if he would object to the characterization, but when you were reading that off, it reminded me of a scout text I got, which was, Meidroth is a player nerds like more than scouts. Which the question is, like, this guy makes tons of contact. He's basically like proper level of investment Nick Madrigal, where he's got this nutty like plate discipline and contact ability. So he's not only kind of never strikes out just from like, having a very short swing, but isn't someone necessarily putting a ton of weak contact into play, other than the fact that like there's just no power what to speak of. And yeah, he's gone up to AAA and it's still kind of working that, people can't just overwhelm him with just fastballs, but it's rare to see that in the majors with somebody who really isn't going to threaten you with a 400 slug, getting walked a lot, the level at which he got at AAA. Like, you see that tend to dissipate with the pitches that they're able to get you out on in the zone. But it's not like a high ceiling chance, but it's kind of it's like an opposite end of the spectrum chance of, there's these baseline major league skills of how often he can put the ball in play for you and just thus give you like kind of a viable at bat, as opposed to getting overwhelmed. And it's not shortstop utility guy, but it's kind of like Yolmer Sanchez level utility, where I don't think he's Gold Glove level at second base or anything like that, but that'd probably be his primary position. Mm-hmm. Plays the kind of style at third where he's, playing shallow and cutting across the diamond the way you had really aggressively, the way you saw the Cubs kind of doing that with Nick Madrigal, and maybe plays left field when you need him, sort of situation like, Danny Mendick did a little bit. Not maybe a major part of the left field mix, but just another reason he's kind of on a roster, provides values, something scouts thought he could do if asked. And obviously, with the way you're used at the major league level, he usually isn't how you're used when you're one of the best prospects on the team in AAA. But that's something I could see kind of coming for him down the road. I don't think he'll be the second best offensive player with the White Sox next year, and yeah, it's something that like instantly you hear it, it's like, well, that's not a good world where that happens. Credit to him, but no thanks. So yeah, I think that correction's coming. It's a question of what degree the correction from how good his stats do against lesser competition.
Well, in spring training, which is a couple months away from when we are recording this episode, before pitchers and catchers report down in Glendale, Arizona, it's going to be an interesting competition up the middle. Chris Getz says he made it clear, if you were following our coverage of the winter meetings, especially on social media, Getz said multiple times that Colson Montgomery is going to get an opportunity to win the starting shortstop job for opening day in camp. And you got Jacob Amaya, Lenyn Sosa's out of options. Brooks Baldwin reached the majors last year. And now you got Chase Meidroth. So it'll be interesting to see on how new manager Will Venable, and how he decides to at least start 2025 with the infielders on the bench, because you also have Brian Ramos and Miguel Vargas part of the equation at third base, maybe DH. And right now, Andrew Vaughn is your first baseman. So more depth. I mean, that is something that Getz did mention, Jim, in the media sessions during the winter meetings, that the White Sox want to add more depth. And Chase Meidroth's got an opportunity to be quality depth. And when I mean quality depth, I'm not like, hey, here's another 2-war position player for the White Sox. No, more like he's not going to embarrass himself in the major leagues. Like, there is some value that Meidroth can provide to the White Sox.
Yeah, he strikes me as, with the lack of power and somebody who's going to hit his way on base. Like, if outfielders can position themselves correctly, like, he could have a hard time dropping singles in eventually, once the league figures out, oh, that's what he does. Oh, we pitch him this way, the contact's going to go this way, and we can cut off a lot of cheap singles he might get, and now it's a lot tougher. Kind of like Tim Anderson without his legs a little bit, how the BABIP dried up when he wasn't able to turn stuff around and really had to settle for being a handsy type, poking the ball to right field type of hitter. So, like, there's that, but the walk rate is something that jumps out in terms of, like, in concert with the addition of Mike Tauchman. Like, just wondering if Getz is like, hey, he draws walks. He has an idea of what the strike zone is. We need guys like that to just try to help see more pitches, try to establish ourselves as not the most aggressive, chase-happy team in the league. So if Meidroth is somebody who gives you a chance to do that, to draw out some at-bats, to not have those like 6-pitch innings, quick 1-2-3s, like, maybe he helps in like indirect ways that make the lineup a little bit more palatable. And, he's still trying to buy time until like a real middle infield shows up. But in the event that he's able to show a little bit more pop, or like the AA power translates to the majors a little bit because he is able to hit mistakes, they're just fewer mistakes, but he's still able to hit the occasional one with some authority, then, there is a chance where he becomes like a starter for a couple of years, or at least like a guy who fills in as a starter for, rotates in and out. And if you have to turn over a position to him because of an injury, you don't hate it. Like, I think that's probably his future if he's not somebody who just has like a balsa bat and it's easy just to, induce weak contact that doesn't really produce anything.
So James, check me here. So those are the 4 prospects the White Sox got in return. So with Garrett Crochet now leaving the White Sox, this is what I have for the White Sox projected starting rotation in mid-December. Jonathan Cannon, Drew Thorpe, Sean Burke, Davis Martin, and the White Sox used their first pick of the Rule 5 draft on former Milwaukee Brewers prospect Shane Smith, which I think Smith has the type of arsenal to be extended as a starter. It'll be interesting to see how the White Sox use him on the 26-man roster. Is that what we're looking at in their projected starting rotation, or is there somebody else that I should replace Shane Smith with and maybe put Smith in my projected bullpen?
Gets mentioned Jairo Uriarte specifically. I would think Kai Busch is in the mix there as well. He also talked about Mason Adams. I'd be hard pressed to see Mason Adams breaking camp, but certainly they're trying to push is look out for us using this guy's starter depth next season. They still want to add a pitcher. They don't necessarily have the budget for a lot of pitcher, but something on the Chris Flexen last year price level is probably on tap at some point. They might have to wait out that market given how decent pitchers have been getting very good money so far to really it might be a February sort of addition at this point. I think it would be hard if they legitimately have someone healthy competing with Smith. I think it would be unlikely that he win the battle for a starting role right out. I think a Jared Schuster type of situation, whereas if his stuff indeed plays get in camp as well as it has a AA at points, and his controls is mostly in check, and they kind of figure out something with his arsenal because he's played around with the cutter a little bit. He kind of naturally cuts his fastball, has a big curve but doesn't have a changeup, doesn't have a slider that's been super consistent over his history. It seems like if they're picking him where other teams were not as high as him on him first overall, they probably have a plan in place for how he might look different. But I think if all their options are healthy, wouldn't think their plan A would be Smith actually winning the 5th starter job. It's more something they see that he could do if pressed upon over the course of the season, or if he shows that improvement over the course of the season, rather than just
got him
5 good starts, good camp kid, go get him. I think they're hoping they have more depth to work with that.
Yeah, I think Kai Busch might be the one who has the inside track if he's healthy, because a lot of the issue last year was just that he was wearing down and the velocity wasn't there. So if he shows up in spring with a fresh arm and he's hitting 94 again, then all of a sudden his pitch mix is probably worth looking at on a major league roster. He's going to be using an option anyway if they send him down at the start of the season. So on the 40-man, may as well use that rather than calling up a Mason Adams or something like that. So he would be my first guess. It might not end well. It might be a case where he's still shy around the strike zone because some strikes get hits. Given that he didn't have his best stuff and had to, walk a lot of guys to avoid getting killed and had to settle for a 5-something ERA out of it. If he's, lighting up the gun again, sure, throw him out there, see how it looks, understand how his pitches work against major league hitters. Then if he has to go down to Charlotte again, you understand what the assignment is.
And then two more topics. So leaving Dallas. So we talked about this trade for the White Sox. They were active during the winter meetings. They signed Mike Tauchman. We talked about what he's going to add to the White Sox lineup in the outfield in previous podcast episodes. They trade Garrett Crochet. James, what's next for the White Sox post winter meetings?
If they would love for someone to bowl them over for Luis Robert, but I continue to think maybe the teams that are interested right now will be the teams that are pounding their door for Luis Robert or offering something better mid-season when he's had the best first half ever. MVP, maybe, who knows? Let's have pie in the sky ideas. I just think right now they're going to get the ultimate goal. Why he's interesting to a lot of crop of teams and why maybe a different population of teams that want him at the deadline is that he is an intriguing buy low option. You think you are getting premium tools for somebody who's coming off poor performance, and maybe you're thinking the White Sox backs are against the wall a little bit with the revenue situation where Luis Robert has another bad season. They're buying him out anyway. So I think you're looking for you're just going to get a lot of offers from teams that are hoping you're seeing this as the last rung you can grab on your way down, not someone who's going to offer you this, what their schematics were for what they'd want in a Luis Robert deal when they were drawing this up at the last deadline. So I don't think it's going to be the big domino, but that is the one thing that it's going to keep me up at night, knowing they want to do. I don't think Christ has been crazy. I still think $45 million of Benintendi, or however much it's left, is going to be hard to unload. Even if he looked better, I think the last 2 years in whole, it's going to be too much for any team out there ready to really assume in some major way. And if he keeps playing better, I think they're in a better position to maybe get something for him probably a year down the road, but maybe at the break, if he's really cooking as well as he did in the second half. I imagine it's just a pure dump right now, unless you just think man, that was the last good half ever. Let's get out of here. Oh, he still can. I think that also one's less unlikely, but I think you're going to see some small ads for catcher and then starting rotation, and then probably some more NRIs to give them a more competitive camp. They definitely want to sign a reliever too. I think if the Brebbia signing of last year, maybe that's a little bit richer than what they're doing this season, but I think you see a major league deal or two for relief candidates of guys that they think can have a good first half of the season and be worth a small trade at the break, and something a little bit bigger than Dan Altavilla, as excited as he seems to be on Twitter and as hard as he throws. Obviously, it's in more NRI territory.
Got it. All right. So zooming out from the White Sox, taking a look around Major League Baseball, there's a lot of gossip. There's a lot of rumors right now, even after the winter meetings. But Jim, as we were there in Dallas and attending the winter meetings, when you look at the league as a whole, what's your biggest takeaway from the 2024 winter meetings?
I guess just a lot of money and
money being spent.
Yeah. And I think it's, in a way, in terms of timing, in terms of Juan Soto kicking off the winter meetings by signing his deal, and Garrett Crochet being traded at the very end of it, that's what you want the winter meetings to be, is a showcase of awesome talent being acquired by teams with ambition and really supercharging MLB Network conversations versus speculating on where Juan Soto is going to sign for the fourth month in a row in February and not having it happen. So on that side, that's what I think Rob Manfred would have dreamed of. On the other, it does feel like a little bit of a monkey's paw situation in terms of just how much money these guys are going for, how some teams are completely sitting it out, even if they might be like the Cubs or the Twins. Those are two teams that theoretically should be adding because they are in a good position against the rest of their division to where they are, how many games they've won, flex them financial might and just aren't because of the TV deal. So there is like this undercurrent of haves and have-nots, or confident owners, or owners that don't mind running a deficit versus ones that are looking to make a profit, or at least not be too far in the red. And you wonder how much longer it can go on, like how many consecutive off seasons like this go on before you really have a divide that is hard to bridge.
I think you're already there. That's my biggest takeaway from these winter meetings. Like the joke is, we know where 2025 winter meetings are. They're in Orlando. We also know where the 2026 winter meetings are, at home. Like that's not going to happen. December 2nd, 12:01 a.m., the league's going to enter another lockdown because the owners can't agree on local television deals, and they're all pissed at each other. A lot of them are going to be pissed off at the Yankees and the Mets for driving up the prices that are just inconceivable for a lot of the organizations. Steve Cohen spending almost $800 million, maybe more than $800 million on Juan Soto. There's some teams that are only getting $15 million for this upcoming season from Major League Baseball to help out with their TV deals. Like, the money is a huge factor right now in Major League Baseball. The local TV bubble has popped. You're going to see some really weird trades, maybe unexpected trades, like the Astros trading Kyle Tucker, because the Astros already know they can't re-sign Kyle Tucker. And even re-signing Alex Bregman right now might be a stretch, that his asking price is just not to a point that the Astros either want to or comfortably business-wise can meet his demands. So it really feels like, James, there's only like 6 or 7 teams in Major League Baseball right now that are spending serious cash, and there may only be 6 or 7 teams even going the next year that could spend some cash. And I just think that's going to invite really tough conversations in the owners' meetings until Rob Manfred and the commissioner's office figure out what in the world are we going to do this with the local TV deals, because too many teams now are really worried about cash flow, and that's not going to be good for the overall health of the league.
Yeah, it was like, is it entertaining winter meetings? It's like they put on a show. We got all what we wanted. We saw a lot of activity.
Yeah.
We saw the prices for pitching kind of spike in a way where it's like, even before we got to the meetings, like you see Frankie Montas's figure, and it's like, yeah, Crochet's getting traded. So,
yeah, good
but
point.
Like it's kind of like you turn over the log and you see kind of the rod underneath, and a lot of these deals, a lot of the activity are like teams that should not be shedding salary, should not be sending star players when they're in the middle of the run, trying to cut salary at any cost, or big market teams being like, we can't afford the Cody Bellinger contract, or the Astros, who ostensibly still have Jose Altuve, or just made the playoffs and won the division last year, trading Kyle Tucker to try to extend their contention run, when really it's kind of like you still have Pica, Yordan Alvarez. You kind of have like the 2 best lefty hitters in the league. If you're healthy, what are you doing?
Right.
But there's a lot of the activity is kind of fueled by weird cutting that teams are doing. So it a little bit feels like the last party before the lights get turned out, a little bit, which you say it's like, it feels like there's only 6 or 7 teams spending cash. It feels like there's just 6 or 7 teams, so to speak. It's almost like Crochet's getting traded to another league, to where you can like really might throw like September meaningful baseball playoff games. It almost feels like loans going from like the Premier League to the to Champions League, going back and forth. So you squint and you see healthy.
Well, you're a big soccer guy, right? You play FIFA, and I think you understand it better than I do. But in the Premiership, it always feels like it's the 6 same clubs, right? In the top that either go to the Champions League or the...
They have a set series of heavy hitters who are kind of consistently in it, yeah.
Yeah, like Chelsea, Arsenal, the Manchesters, United.
Man City has really become like the Dodgers of recent, but yeah.
Okay. And Liverpool, maybe Tottenham.
Liverpool's probably Yankees and the biggest brand, but it seems like things might be on the downside.
But you have like what, 20 clubs Yeah,
Tottenham is the Mets. Definitely the Mets.
You have 20 clubs in that league, but it always feels like it's the same 6 that's on the top of the table, not the standings. In Major League Baseball, that's kind of what it feels like. We have the potential to see some really super teams being organized and teams of quality that we'll be talking about for years down the road. Is that good for the overall league's health? I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on luck and player health in the end and just how the ball bounces in the postseason and who actually plays for the World Series, because we're just a couple years after a Texas Rangers and Arizona Diamondbacks World Series. But we just saw a Dodgers and Yankees World Series, and with the way the Mets are spending, it just really feels like there's 6 or 7 super teams in Major League Baseball right now and everybody else.
Yeah, it's not that dissimilar from issues you see pop up in the NBA, where there's like 6 series contenders that have really long windows. The NFL is probably better at creating like season to season interchange and parity, but there's still like teams that are consistently well run and consistently poorly run, and they're kind of, because of salary cap, you don't see it play out in such obvious ways, but like facilities and the type of extensions they offer and stuff like that. Everyone kind of has their wheat and their chaff a little bit, but I think a specific goal of baseball to not be like this, and a specific pressure point, because not that I would advocate a salary cap, but it's certainly because without it, having teams that just kind of step aside from being competitive allows the gap to really distend in a way, because there are no really guide places like guardrails in place to keep teams that just like totally quit from being like eons away from the market of where you have to be competitive for titles. So I think it causes a little bit more stress to see it turn this way, and it's a little bit harder to see, especially thinking that watching what the commissioner's office is willing to abide what owners do a lot of the ways, and kind of tearing down teams and tearing down the infrastructure, even the organization, to think that the league is really going to make any major step that really tries to enforce a culture where our owners feel like pressure to or obligation to consistently provide a contending team. So it feels a little bit more dire, even if it's kind of a symptom that is pretty common.
There's time. I mean, that's the good news. The league itself and the owners have time before the CBA expires, but they got to hustle here.
And they'll have time in the lockout to kind of reconsider their actions. So that's the benefit.
Yeah, well, I guess
we'll all have time to consider our ways while there's no baseball.
No kidding. No baseball activity. Yeah, so that was my big takeaway. Like the TV, like Jim mentioned, as far as the money being spent, I'm also money, but the TV money or lack thereof for some teams are making, some GMs are just forced to make some serious decisions that seem like they're unloading stars, even though they should be in their competitive window, and it just sends mixed signals, especially at Houston. It sounds like, if you believe the gossip, Kyle Tucker's going to be traded sometime this weekend. And the next time we podcast, Kyle Tucker could be with the Chicago Cubs, or he could be with the New York Yankees. Really fascinating stuff, at least from my perspective. So, James, do you have a takeaway? What's your big takeaway after the winter meetings when looking at it from a league perspective?
I wish we didn't have to spend, I wish TV executive negotiations wasn't like the big barometer of like who's going to survive and not, or who's going to be competitive. I wish it was a lower piece of relevance. I think the winter meetings is a big reminder that this sport is commerce, and with kind of baseball window dressing thrown around. It's a very corporate affair, and no pitches are thrown. It's very all consuming, but also this is not, I think this kind of big orgy of celebrating the executive and deals and machinations is it's one lane which people appreciate the sport. It's one I wish like you saw the seams of how it affected what's on the field less often.
No, that's a really good point. That's a good point. Well, that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. So that is our trade reaction to the White Sox sending Garrett Crochet to the Boston Red Sox. We wish the best of luck to Garrett Crochet as he also joins old friends Liam Hendriks and Lucas Giolito with the Red Sox. And now we wait to see if Luis Robert does get dealt, and we can start having those conversations a little bit more seriously in upcoming podcasts. But we'll also see in how this weekend unfolds in the aftermath of the 2024 winter meetings, if there are more trades incoming around Major League Baseball. But that will do it for this Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can subscribe to the Sox Machine Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. Follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. We are also on Blue Sky. You can find us at SoxMachine.com on Blue Sky. Thank you again to our Patreon supporters for your continued support. It allowed us to go down to the winter meetings. It allowed us for James to change to a later flight to cover the breaking news of Garrett Crochet being traded to the Boston Red Sox, and the White Sox getting Kyle Teel and Braden Montgomery. If you enjoy our work and you want full access to all of our coverage of the Chicago White Sox and Major League Baseball, you can sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Monthly plans start at $5. The Sox Machine Podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.